Hi, this is the first installment of what I hope to be a multi-part series about kind of interesting things in anime tropes and anime genres. This isn't supposed to be kind of like a comprehensive overview of a trope or a genre or anything like that. More just like little phenomenons and quirks that I find interesting and that I think about a lot. And it's more about trying to convey the mechanism of how they work rather than listing a bunch of examples to prove that they work. So this one is about harem MCs and this idea of super-insertion, which I've come up with. We're all probably pretty familiar with self-insertion, but what is super-insertion? Let's find out. So if you don't know, the harem genre is pretty simple. You have one male character, he's your main character, and then a whole bunch of, MC, main character, and then a whole bunch of girls that are all hopelessly in love with him. Typically, the way it works is that a girl will show up, and then for a few chapters or episodes, she'll kind of get to know the MC, and then she'll start to pine over him, and then for the next 100 or 1,000 chapters or episodes, she's just kind of stuck in this vortex of having intimate moments with him, becoming closer to him, and then never actually being able to bridge that gap into a substantial relationship, not able to confess her feelings to him. So, what is this man character? What is this male main character that drives the ladies wild, that finds himself at the center of this harem? Well, typically you get traits like he's kind, he's nice to the girls, he's considerate. He'll remember things that the girl is hoping that he'll remember. He's like a little sentimental. He's dependable. He's always willing to sacrifice his time and energy and other opportunities to help the girl out of a jam. And he's competent. Sometimes they'll even have kind of like skills, like really good at sports or something, but this isn't usually a focus. It's just mentioned in passing because they can't really do anything that takes them away from the girls too often. What all of these have in common is that they're very bland qualities that almost no one would not want to associate with themselves. And what that leads to, of course, is the phenomenon of self-insertion. And this is a very practical reason for why the harem MC has to be bland. Um, Most of the plots involve him kind of helping the girls out of jams. The girl will have some trouble with, I don't know, like school or their family or their job or whatever. And then the guy sacrifices his time and energy, helps him out. So we get this kind of portrayal of a bland, always ready to rescue guy that pretty much any watcher could easily see themselves as being. There's no really out there character traits that they wouldn't want to recognize within themselves. So that then when the girls make advances on the guy and are all lovey-dovey around him, or there's situations where there's like fan servicey things, it's very easy for the viewer to imagine that that's happening to himself. This is all pretty standard stuff. This is a well understood mechanism. And people kind of accept that the harem MC is going to be very bland for this reason. But there's another trait that harem MCs get, which is occasional extreme denseness. And this is not something that people want to associate with themselves. And when it happens reliably is when the female character, when the girl wants to confess, wants to bridge that gap and make her feelings known. And these are usually like the very intimate moments at the climax of a chapter or an arc, where the guy and the girl are hanging out and the girl is like very appreciative of the guy helping him out of whatever jam. And she's on like the verge of saying something, and then it's interrupted either by some external force, like in Nisekoi, the baseball coming through the window, or the guy simply misinterpreting her, misunderstanding her, falling asleep, getting a phone call, anything. to delay or to stop the confession from happening. And in these moments, the readers feel extremely frustrated at what they see as kind of a very deus ex machina almost force of God just forbidding this thing to continue. And usually people attribute it to the very pragmatical reason that if the confession is successful, if the girl makes her feelings known, then one way or the other, whether they're reciprocated or not, the series is just gonna end. Um, so they need the MC to carry on with this supernatural denseness, where not only is every confession cursed to fail, to come to completion, but the MC almost gets like amnesia about it. That he never thinks later, like, what was it that she was about to say in that moment? And she goes, watashi wa anata no, and then, like, whatever. Like, they never seem to want to follow up on it or go back to her and say, hey, what was that you wanted to say there? It's this one quality that just seems so unrealistic and unfeasible compared to the other positive qualities. So it leads to a lot of frustration. This is something where people complain about the harem genre a lot. And I do agree that it's probably mostly a pragmatic reason that they want their series to go on for as long as possible, and that means keeping all the girls in limbo for as long as possible. But I think there's more to it. I think there's another thing that happens. And that, of course, is that it's not just about the self-insertion. It's not just about thinking the MC is like yourself. It's about super-insertion. So this is a concept I came up with when I was watching cringe comedy. So something completely different. Cringe comedy is a genre of mostly Western comedy, although there are some anime that kind of incorporate cringe elements like Watamote. And basically the root of the comedy is in these big conversational train wrecks where people are just saying the wrong thing over and over again. They're really putting their foot in the mouth. It becomes really embarrassing and uncomfortable, and you feel like you both can't watch and can't turn away. It's a very polarizing thing. Some people love it. I personally love it. Other people hate it. But the mechanism under which it works is sort of similar to the frustration that people have around the denseness of harem MCs, I think. So you're watching it and you're thinking like, oh my god, like please stop, just please stop talking. And then you even start to think like, just say this. You know, I think this is a very common reaction to cringe comedy, that you want to like shout a suggestion to them. That to you it's obvious how to pull the conversation back onto the rails, pull it out of the free fall, out of the rickety train canyon. I just had a very strong mental image in my mind. I don't know if I was able to convey it to you, but to write the situation. And of course, because you're just watching a TV show, you have absolutely no power to do that. But the feeling still remains. And although that's a feeling of frustration, I think there's another side of it that's happening maybe even entirely subconsciously, of affirmation, where basically you're thinking, well, I knew what to say. If I was in that situation, I know how I would resolve it. I would just like apologize or correct the misunderstanding or whatever. And it would be so much better than the disaster I just witnessed on this TV show. And you think, therefore I must be kind of like socially okay. I must actually have pretty good social skills. I don't think anyone is like consciously thinking this, but I think it's kind of this feeling that you get after you're watching cringe comedy, where everything that you do, every social interaction you have, feels a lot more hopeful, feels a lot more, I don't know, good in general. So I think similarly, in these situations of extreme denseness in the harem MCs, the viewer is thinking, I know how I would respond. I know that I would be able to understand that she was trying to confess, and I know exactly what I would say to kind of help her get there. Or I know that, even though the baseball just came through the window and oh my god, everyone's panicking, later we can talk about this. I know how I would bring it up later such that we can complete this conversation and acknowledge each other's feelings. And you think, therefore, maybe I'm like romantically okay. Maybe I can handle this whole relationship business. And I think that that alone gets rid of one kind of paradox of the whole harem genre. Like the harem genre is very kind of otaku skewed. And I don't want to sound offensive or that I'm making fun of like my own people in some way, but probably a lot of these people skew to the inexperienced side when it comes to relationships. And for them to be self-inserting as an MC that has a whole lot of girls just falling in love with him all over the place, just tripping over themselves to fall in love with him, you would think that there's kind of a disconnect there, and that maybe the self-insertion would fail because they can't imagine that they could be so successful in love. But I think by showing these acute moments of incompetence, of just total stunning, almost fourth wall breaking incompetence, um, it's hard not to imagine yourself as relatively okay, relatively full of this potential. The other thing that I think this enables is an aspect of choice. And this is another kind of major paradox with the harem series, is that they have all these girls, and kind of the way you're encouraged to engage with the series is to pick your favorite girl and root for her. Hope that in the end, she's the one that's able to convey her feelings, she's the one that has her feelings reciprocated, and that her and the MC, who by proxy is you, will go off and live happily ever after. But of course, in the actual series, it can only end in one way. Outside of the very rare harem ending, he only picks like one girl and everyone else is disappointed. But I think through this power of super-insertion, you can actually overcome that. So what kind of ends up happening is, in some situations, the reader is freaking out and frustrated and going, oh my god, like, can't you understand what's happening here? Just get it through your thick skull. She's trying to confess. You guys can be happy together. And then in other situations with the girls that he's not rooting for, is whatever. Okay, they talked, whatever. And this kind of lets you feel like you are actually controlling the situation somewhat. That in your mind, there's kind of a parallel plot line. I think I drew some diagrams about this. Oh yeah, so this is your typical end. Picks one girl, they fall in love. All the other girls unhappy. But through this process of super-insertion, where not only are you following the real MC, but you kind of have this imagined self-MC running parallel, you can pick any girl you want. When it gets to the ending, you can in your mind say, oh, okay, well, you know, he ended up with her, but me, if I was in that situation, and by all evidence I could have been in that situation, I would have ended up with this other girl. The really good one, the one that I like. And this leads to the amazing quantum superposition of super-insertion, where all endings occur simultaneously. And I mean, once the series is over, who's going to dispute it? There's no more. You can imagine that it ended however you like, really. It's a pretty powerful thing. And I think it's the only way that you can kind of make this formula work. Otherwise, the feeling of rejection, I think, would be so bitter that people would feel kind of scorn towards the entire genre. Speaking of bitterness and scorn, though, I want to point out that there is kind of another breed of MCs that I think have been getting more popular lately, kind of kicked off by Cohn and Hardy, I think, where they're a lot more cynical, they're much more savvy, sometimes kind of genre savvy about the genre that they themselves are in. Sometimes they'll realize quite early the girl's feelings, but they're just so cynical and world weary and brooding or sarcastic or whatever that they can't reciprocate. And you end up with that same kind of in perpetuity and limbo and failed confession after failed confession. Excuse me. And I think, though, this is supposed to appeal to people that can't relate to the normal MC, the kind, dependable MC, and want something that's like 180 degrees. But it still falls into the super-insertion trap. The difference is that here, instead of thinking, okay, in this one situation, I wouldn't be so dense and I would return her feelings, you're thinking, okay, in this one situation, I wouldn't be so cynical and I would actually open myself up to the possibility of love or whatever. So I think it's the same thing. And I can't really think of any MC archetype in this genre that falls outside of this framework. But what if you're fed up with the idea of male characters in general? What if you just want to remove the MC in the first place? What amazing genre is left when you just have all the girls? Well, we'll talk about that in a future video, which I'm titling Slice of Life and the Self-Excluding Paradise, I think. I have a lot of things I want to say about it, but not as much of like a clear thesis as this video. In this video, you know, I'm not that interested in harem as a genre, but I'm interested in this effect. I'm interested in this idea of feeling that you know better than the characters that you're watching, and somehow getting something out of that. That you're not just content with feeling like you are the character, but that you are living an even better version of the life that you see depicted. It's very interesting. I feel like isekai kind of fits into this a lot too. So there might be another video on isekai, but I'll have to think about it some more. Anyways, this was kind of fun to do. I've wanted to do it for a while. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you have any thoughts or feelings, please let me know. And yeah, look forward to hopefully more of these. If I can kind of think of a really definitive thing I want to say about Slice of Life, hopefully it'll happen soon. I hope you liked my slides too. I made them pretty quickly, but I think they get the job done. Okay, that's all. Bye-bye.